Hey, what's up, YouTube? Goratha here. So, I'm bringing you guys another, hopefully not bait build, the Glacial Hammer Trauma Bone Shredder thing. I'm not sure what to call it yet. Frostbeak. I don't know. Anyways, this is the new build that I have been POBing for the last couple days. I haven't actually played it in-game yet because the Trauma Gym doesn't exist yet. I will be doing regular update videos for this character, assuming it goes well. And yeah, let's get into it. So I recommend leveling with Ground Slam. I have a Ground Slam tree here. I actually have a couple trees. You can look at the POB. There's a bunch of things to choose from, and a lot of notes, and all that good stuff. But anyways, I recommend leveling with Ground Slam into Sunder. Sunder at level 12. And rushing Luster Carnage. You can take all the damage at the beginning. This will help your leveling process as well. Marauder is generally pretty slow, so all the damage you can get early is good. You want to take versatility because for some reason Marauder can't actually use the movement skill without having a little bit of dex or int. So we have versatility. The accuracy is also very nice as well. So what do you need to do before you switch to Glacial Hammer? The main things to switch, or the main things you need before you switch to Glacial Hammer are Tribal Fury. This gives you Mighty Splash, the additional Strike Mastery, and Call to Arms. This will give you Ancestral Cry instant cast. I generally like to keep that on left click, and it kind of just automates itself. But anyways, this basically gives you your quality of life with Glacial Hammer. It'll give you AoE, and it'll give you strike range, and it'll kind of make the skill actually feel good. You could play Sunder for a bit longer if you want, but you can switch to Glacial Hammer at this point now if you want to. Now, you do need a couple things before you switch to the Trauma Gym, which you'll get at level 38. You need Inexorable, which will give you endurance charges when you take damage. This will work with the Trauma. And Untiring. I do recommend you take Undeniable first from your normal lab. This fixes the accuracy problem you have and gives you a lot of attack speed. And it'll make it so it's very easy to get Precise Technique later. So it might be worth considering to not switch to Trauma right away and just waiting until you have the Crow lab. Something to play around with. You might be able to get away with it. The Trauma Gem is less damage taken than Bone Shadow, for example. We'll have to see how that pans out. Here's the level 70 tree. I grab Weathered Hunter on the tree because early on you probably won't have accuracy, and this should enable the precise technique. You want to rush Precise Technique as fast as possible and the Invert Mastery from the Elemental Mastery. These are very important, as well as the Fangs of Frost. Once you get this stuff, you'll start doing pretty good single target. Before then, your single target will struggle a little bit. Well, that was before the patch. With Trauma, you might not struggle at all. I was doing some practice runs, and I noticed once I got these nodes, my damage was good. I take Graceful Assault on this part of the tree because this gets Onslaught, and this is the part of the game where you don't have, like, Tanirahi, for example. I'll talk about the items in a bit, but we're using Tanirahi later for Onslaught, and this is kind of like the nice in-between to get that. You can also use a Silver Flask if you want, and you want to get Leech at this point as well. And past that, we have some more tree upgrades. We get Suppression. We get Duration to make our Trauma last longer. Some Mana Masteries. Some Reservation stuff. All that good stuff. I'm not going to go too in-depth in that. Pretty self-explanatory, I feel like. Oh, one thing I should mention, though, is the Fortify. We're actually getting Fortify on the tree. From the Fortify Mastery. The really cool part about this is you can drop these points later to get a cluster set up. We're going to eventually go for Overlord Cluster, which gives us Fortify with Mace melee hits, which is really nice. And all the Mace nodes and notables are really good, and also give us 2 extra jewel slots, which is very strong. But yeah, that's basically the tree and the gear. So there's a couple important pieces with the gear. You have some pretty generic gear, like the rings. I like to get minus mana and accuracy on the rings. The unique items are the most important part, though. Frost Breath. This is like your main item. Some people say Bright Peak will be really good as well. It is an option. You'll be taking a lot more damage from Trauma, though. There's a couple options to play around with. You could potentially dual wield with Bright Peak Frost Breath, or use a shield. Use Bright Peak Shield, Frost Breath Shield. I personally am probably going Frost Breath Shield, but we'll see. It's something that I'm going to play around with for sure. The next unique item is Heat Shiver. This is probably the next most important item. This is going to be a bit harder to get in SSF, but you can probably get one eventually. I found a couple of them last league, but it's not guaranteed, so yeah. The really cool part about Heat Shiver with Glacial Hammer is you actually are guaranteed to freeze bosses, pretty much, because Glacial Hammer has 390% more damage every third hit for the freeze. Most builds that have Heat Shiver are kind of debate, or it's like PB Warrior stuff, because you're not actually freezing when it matters. But it's not the case with Glacial Hammer. You actually freeze when it matters. So I recommend you use a really high armor chest. There's a lot of options, like I said, with the chest piece, though. I personally just recommend getting a PDR, like Fist Against Ellie maybe, Hatred or Effect, high armor, Glorious Plate. This is just big for Juggernaut because you double the armor with Unbreakable. The glove slot. I think Tanya Ahis are just too hard to beat. This is like your best in slot. This gives you Adrenaline. This gives you Onslaught. You're always taking damage from trauma, so you're always leeching. The uptime will be really good. This is a really solid item. I'm hoping they don't make this rare, because I feel like this is kind of common for how strong it is. Suppression gear for like the boots. Maybe some Chaos Res. Damage Pin enchant is really good. Yoke of Suffering. The next slot is pretty stacked. Yoke of Suffering is the damage option. You can also get Eternal Damnation or Hinakor's Sight for the early game. Lots of options there. The rest of it's kind of generic gear. I guess I should mention Taste of Hate. Taste of Hate's very strong. You take less damage from trauma. You deal more damage because you're a Fizz Converted to Cold build, so that's very good as well. In general, you want to have some accuracy on jewels or like rings and stuff. You want to just make precise technique work, basically. And accuracy gives you attack speed from Undeniable. Jug is very nice quality of life. You're immune to stun and freeze from Unstoppable. You have a lot of armor, which applies to your elemental hits. You don't need suppression right away once you have Unbreakable. This tree does get suppression capped, and I think that is the way to go. But like I said, you have a couple options later. You have like Fourth Bow with Divine Flesh, potentially Brass Dome, Eternal Damnation. There's a lot of options. A lot of them in the notes there, if you guys want to take a look. And I have some leveling items as well, like the Hinakoras for early precise technique, or like easy precise technique. Stuff like that. Dragon and Death POB. I will be updating this when I play the character, because this is all in theory right now. I've tested a couple characters, but nothing like super endgame. I'll be playing it and seeing what I should change. One important node to mention on the tree is Panopticon. I don't have it in one of these trees. I do feel like it's worth going for, because totems are pretty important for melee characters. The linger buff is really strong. It makes it so if your totems are dying instantly, you still have the buffs, which is it's pretty important. Like, the buffs are really big for melee. If I take off the Protector totem, for example, and the War Chief totem, our damage is like halved. Maybe not halved, but it's a significant portion of our damage. So you really want to have that consistency. So a lot of people have been asking me, like, how are we getting Rage? There's a couple ways to get Rage. The first way is Word's Mark, Cast and Shaken. You can't stun a monster and freeze on the same hit, but you can stun a frozen monster. So I think the Word's Mark will still work pretty well with that. If that's not the case, though, we do have the Vengeance and Rage combination. The Vengeance will actually proc when we take damage from our trauma, so we'll be proccing our Rage constantly from that. That's an option. Or there's also the Chains of Emancipation belt with Rotblood. That's another option. You'll get full Rage whenever you remove your curses. So you get a curse from Rotblood, like you self-curse, and then you remove it with the Chains of Emancipation. This will be some good tech if you want to use Berserk. I'm not sure if I'll do this or not, but it's something to consider. There's also another option with Self-Chilling, which would be called the Void and Winterweave. This could be very strong as well. Self-Chill gives you a bunch of attack speed. Just something to consider. I put it all in the notes there if you guys want to take a look. And yeah, I think that's everything I wanted to talk about. We'll have to see how the character plays out. I'm very excited for it. I have high hopes for it, and I really hope it's not a bait, because it looks good on paper, and it felt good when I played it, and it's just getting stronger. Plus, I mean, it's just super satisfying. Everything's getting shattered. You have these cold explosions. It's very nice play. Very nice feel. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you guys next time.